Beside him is Monty Meyer. He's on the committee with me also. He's the correctional officer at Toronto West Detention Center. And beside me is Tammy Carson. She's a correctional officer from Central North Correctional Center and chair of our Joint Provincial Health and Safety Committee. I'm going to read a brief statement. Correctional officers, local presidents, and executive members from across the province met this morning, and we have a statement to present to the press, and I'll follow it up with some questions and answers following. Correctional officers representing the 29 institutions in the province of Ontario met today in Toronto to review and discuss the Ombudsman's report on the use of force in correctional facilities. We are disappointed and extremely concerned that the Ombudsman's report is filled with inaccuracies and the use of one-sided information that portrays an incorrect picture about the realities inside Ontario's jails. Correctional officers agree that even one case of excessive force or the use of excessive force is one too many. We also acknowledge that the Ombudsman's report has identified that a code of silence is a factor in some cases where excessive force was used. That said, we do not believe that these factors can be addressed in isolation of all programs facing correctional officers in Ontario. There are systemic issues affecting the correctional system in Ontario today. They include chronic understaffing, inmate overcrowding, poor inmate living conditions, the lack of necessary staff training, the modern equipment to keep communities, inmates, and staff safe. The Ombudsman identified as excessive less than 1% of use of force incidents. Based on ministry numbers of admissions into provincial custody, which is over 93,000 per year, there are approximately 3,500 use of forces annually. Of those, the ministry substantiated 26 cases that were deemed the use of force was excessive. Correctional officers are troubled that the Ombudsman published information regarding some of these cases when they are still proceeding in criminal courts or are at the Grievance Settlement Board. We feel this is inappropriate for the Ombudsman's office to have included information on these cases. Due to the chronic understaffing of jails, the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services has allowed staffing to fall below minimum safety levels. To operate on a daily basis, provincial jails are continually required to utilize staff on overtime. Our jails frequently run short of staff, which causes inmates to remain confined to their cells. This causes increased tension in our facilities, which can often escalate in violent incidences, resulting in injuries and other health-related issues for both staff and inmates. The Ministry has no short-term or long-term plan in place to deal with the inmate overcrowding or the implementations of Bill C-10, which will greatly increase the number of inmates in custody. Many of our institutions are operating at over 100% inmate capacity on a daily basis. Inmates are housed 3 or more to a cell, which requires inmates to sleep on the floor. Despite the opening of the Toronto South Detention Center and Southwest Detention Center in Windsor, the closing of other institutions has resulted in no new beds being added to the system. In fact, there will be a net decrease in the number of available beds in the province, which will only add to the overcrowding pressures. In the short term, jail closures need to be re-examined. A long-term plan needs to be developed for the future of existing facilities and the expanded capacity. The Ministry lacks resources and funding to improve and increase existing training for correctional officers. Mandatory training requirements are not being met due to decreased staffing levels, which do not allow staff to be freed from duties to attend training. New training is not being adopted due to lack of funding. For example, the training to deal with inmates with mental health issues has been limited to only 4 hours of training, despite estimates that over 30% of inmates in the system have mental health problems. Correctional officers have been lobbying for 2 days of training. Training overall is inadequate to meet today's standards. Correctional officers have been lobbying for modern safety equipment in order to maintain safe and secure environment for inmates and staff inside of provincial institutions. Some equipment that is actually available is only used when escorting inmates out into the community. This equipment could be used inside the facilities to increase safety. Many other jurisdictions across the country are using more modern equipment to help deter violence and stop it from escalating when it occurs. Correctional officers do a good job in very difficult conditions. Correctional officers are committed to working with the ministry to effect positive change in our facilities. By modernizing equipment, improving training, and addressing the daily problems of staffing and overcrowding, we can make conditions safer inside the provincial jails and better protect staff, inmates, and the public.